Hello, and welcome to All in the Addicted Gamblers podcast. My name is Chris. I don't gamble. And I am here with Brian, who...
I gambled for 14 years. Lost a lot of money, a lot of years.
If you missed our last episode was actually the story in which Brian sort of told us about his ritual, exactly what he did from the moment he left work to driving to a casino to walking into a casino. He gave us, with great detail, everything he felt about his gambling ritual. And the point of that was to basically convince those of you out there that don't believe that gambling is a disease. Addictive, compulsive gambling is an actual disease. Quick follow-up to that. I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson here. For those of you that are not familiar with the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It is what the American Psychiatric Association uses as basically their main textbook for mental diseases and disorders. Pathological gambling was first added to the DSM in 1980 when the DSM version 3 was published. However, when it was added in 1980, there wasn't a great deal of research or testing behind what was put into the DSM. But by the time the DSM-4 was released in 1994, it had basically been accepted as a legitimate disease. And now here we are with the DSM-5. The DSM-5, it is classified along with, compulsive gambling is classified along with other diseases like alcoholism, drug addictions, written by Christine Riley and Nathan Smith, called The Evolving Definition of Pathological Gambling in the DSM-5. And one thing that I want to highlight is when the DSM-4 was released in 1994, you had to meet 5 of 10 criteria to be considered a pathological or compulsive gambler. Long story short, compulsive gambling it's a disease like alcoholism, like drug addiction. There are treatments for it, but you can't necessarily cure yourself of it. You can be in remission for decades, for most of your life, in fact. You can relapse at any point in time. Brian, would you like to add anything to this?
Yeah. Like any alcoholic or someone addicted to drugs, they'll tell you that you're never cured. It's always an ongoing battle, and it's always about that. The most common expression is, as an alcoholic would say, I have that first drink. Who knows what happens after that? If I make one bet.
So you agree?
Oh, yeah, I agree. And I guess I used to not agree. When I first started going to Gamblers Anonymous meetings, I didn't think it... I went to meetings because I didn't want to gamble. Generally, you go to GA for the first time because you hit rock bottom. Turns out my rock bottom came much later, but still. You go to these meetings for that reason, and I, at the time, didn't think it was a lot. People were talking about it being a disease, and I was just like, no, I screwed up. This isn't a disease. This was a choice I made to gamble because I wanted easy money, I guess I just started just having fun, but then it turned into an addiction, of which I just wanted easy money, and I still didn't qualify it as a disease. And then after years in the program, I was just like, this is a disease. I even talked to a counselor who's a psychiatrist. She said she was quoting the same manual that you're quoting, which is that it is a disease. And the example she gave me, which is that I'm going to say this in non-medical terms because I don't remember specifically what she said, but she said that part of your brain, there was an experiment done, part of the brain that lights up when, for pure enjoyment, fun, that part of the brain lights up.
Sure.
That is the part of the brain that lights up when I gamble. I'll talk to her, and I'll send her a note and ask her what that, again, in a future podcast, I'll let you know specifically what she said, but you guys get the point. I now believe it is a disease, but at the same time, I understand that not everyone suffers from it. There are people who can gamble and just for fun.
Yeah.
And it generally doesn't become a problem until it's a financial problem. That's the issue with it.
Well, exactly. Like people that are addicted to alcohol and drugs, you have a high off of, with alcohol and drugs, obviously, it can be a literal high, but with gambling, it can be, let's say, an endorphin rush that you feel this huge surge of endorphins in your body and you feel great and you want to feel that again. What is that called? Chasing the dragon? Chasing the unicorn?
I thought the chasing the dragon was a reference to heroin.
Exactly. No, exactly. You're constantly chasing the dragon because you're your subsequent highs are never as good as that first high. And so you keep wanting to shoot up more and more. And with gambling, it's you keep chasing that initial rush that you had when you, let's say, had heard that first jackpot bell, or, you know, that in our case, because back when you started gambling anyways, actual coins came out of machines, and you hear that first windfall of just hundreds of coins just coming out of the machines. You constantly seek that same feeling, but as you go through the process, you sort of desensitize yourself to that feeling. The more you do drugs, the more it takes for you to achieve the same levels of being high. Same thing applies with gambling. The more you gamble, the more it takes you to feel the same with your gambling. But gambling,
that first jackpot I hit on blackjack when I was 18, and I won $150 on one blackjack. I was to the moon. And then now, a $150 jackpot wouldn't do anything for me.
Yeah, exactly. So I may not have made the specifics very clear earlier when I was talking about the DSM manual and all that, but
you're not a doctor. You're just reading
exactly.
Reading
Neither of us are doctors.
So there were certain criteria that you said, sort of like a few episodes ago. We talked about the 20 questions in GA, and if you answer 7 out of 10, they say that you're an addicted gambler. What are the criteria for the DSM?
Right now, I have the DSM-4 diagnostic criteria for gambling disorders. The DSM-4 was released in 1994, and it has 10 things on it, which I'll read to you right here. Number 1, a preoccupation with gambling, as in preoccupation with reliving past gambling experiences, handicapping, or thinking of ways to get money with which to gamble. Number 2, a need to gamble with increasing amounts of money in order to achieve the desired level of excitement. Number 3, repeated unsuccessful efforts to control, cut back, or stop gambling. 4. Go ahead. Sure.
Can we just start over, and can I answer?
That's a great idea.
Let's do that.
Okay, so Brian, being a compulsive gambler, or admittedly having a gambling disorder, do you have a preoccupation with gambling, which is reliving past gambling experiences, or handicapping, or thinking of ways to get money with which to gamble?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Do you have a need to gamble with increasing amounts of money in order to achieve the desired level of excitement?
Yes.
And both of those are kind of going off of what we were just talking about with chasing the dragon and needing to go more and more. Okay.
Yes, and let's just repeat the fact that currently it's been 7 months since I gambled, just so.
Yeah. Number 3, have you repeated unsuccessful efforts to control, cut back, or stop gambling?
Yes.
Do you feel restless or irritable when attempting to cut down or stop your gambling?
I did, yes.
Do you use gambling as a way of escaping your problems or of relieving a dysphoric mood, or, in other words, feelings of hopelessness, guilt, anxiety, or depression?
Absolutely.
So you use gambling to make yourself feel better.
Yes.
The long and short of it.
I tried.
The 6th one. After losing money gambling, do you often return another day to get even, as in get your money back?
Up until 7 months ago, yes.
Okay. Do you lie to family members, therapists, or others to conceal the extent of your involvement with gambling?
Absolutely.
Yes, you have.
And that's what I will say, that many people in the program will say, like, that's the main thing that they felt bad about was how gambling turned them into such a liar in their life. Because you're lying about small things, you're lying about large things, you're just lying all the time.
Yeah, okay. The 8th one is, have you committed illegal acts such as forgery, fraud, theft, or embezzlement to finance your gambling? No. And we're going to come back to that one specifically in a moment. 9, have you jeopardized or lost a significant relationship, job, or educational or career opportunity because of gambling?
A couple different ways. I used to say I was going to class, and I would go to the casino.
Mm-hmm.
So I never graduated from college because I was gambling. And other reasons, too, but that was one of them. That wasn't the only reason. But and then, yes, I have broken up with women before just to sort of purge myself in a purge of anything that made me think of gambling. I've just to get a fresh start, I have broken up with women. with girlfriends.
That's interesting. I'm going to make a note of that, and we're going to come back to that at some later point. The last one is, have you ever relied on others to provide you money to relieve a desperate financial situation caused by gambling?
Someone with poor credit, yes.
I'm sorry to laugh at that, but Brian and I each have...
Oh, you can... That's an open conversation, man. I don't feel bad.
Yeah, we've already discussed this particular incident, but when relying on others to provide you with money, I was one of those others a long, long time ago that helped provide Brian with money to continue gambling. So
Chris had a few drinks, and I took his ATM card.
So those right there are the 10 criteria, according to the DSM-4, for gambling disorders. And what you need to do is you need to meet 5 of those 10 criteria. And I think going through those, you met, 9 of them? Everything but the illegal acts?
Yes.
The DSM-5, and this is not, I'm sure this is not the only difference, but the DSM-5, which was released in 2013, removed the committing illegal acts such as forgery, fraud, theft, or embezzlement to finance gambling as one of the criteria, because you can obviously be addicted to something, have a gambling disease like Brian, without ever actually going so far as committing illegal acts to finance or further your addiction. So I don't know if it's within the newest criteria is you need 4, and they've also dropped the criteria from 5 down to 4. So I don't know if it's 4 out of 9 now or what, but point is...
Either way, it's a yes for me.
Yes. So those are the criteria.
And I would just add one caveat just that says, if in your mind you ever think that you have a gambling problem, it's a good idea to explore that. Even if you don't meet the criteria, it's probably a good idea to talk to somebody. Because even if it's 2 or 3, chances are if you think that, maybe I have a problem, you probably have a problem.
To take that thought full circle and
sure.
And related.
Well,
What?
Did you have anything else on the DSM?
No, not particularly.
Didn't you say you had another article, or was this the only one this time?
Oh, this was the only one this time.
Okay.
I had a few others the other day, but we can come back to that later. Yeah, to take the thought full circle, basically, for anyone out there that doesn't believe that compulsive gambling is not a disease, it's obviously very, very much a disease. If you need further proof or evidence, listen to our last podcast, when Brian, you basically made yourself physically ill,
I had never felt physically ill up until that point. I had been to one Gamblers Anonymous meeting, and then a year and a half later, I went to my second Gamblers Anonymous meeting because I finally bottomed out at the casino and I felt physically ill. I mean, I threw away $200 at the very end of my evening I purged myself of all my money because I just didn't want it. My stomach felt ill. And again, part of my ritual was to chain smoke when I gambled. I would chain smoke cigarettes, and so I'm sure that had a bit to do with it, but, I felt physically ill at the end of my night and just realized I needed a change in my life.
Well, not just the end of that night, but also the last episode when we recorded that, you, correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't you starting to get into your story as you were telling it and describing your ritual for how you like to gamble? Wasn't that also sort of bringing back, or at least giving you physiological symptoms of those times? Like you were putting yourself in your
DSM
shoes.
said I was reliving old times.
Well, no, not nothing to do with the DSM, but point is, you can listen to our last podcast and hear Brian tell his story of exactly what he would do, and he becomes so immersed in his storytelling. You cannot find fault with the fact that this was very real for him. That it's obvious that
for me it's a problem and it's a disease.
Yeah.
Yes,
and so
for me,
I was just following that up with some DSM info. You may not think psychiatry is a real thing, Tom Cruise, but the rest of us out here, yes.
Well, maybe if I was a Scientologist, I would gamble.
Most of us do.
So we left off last time. I was going to go to GA.
Fair enough. And yeah, actually, you had reached up to that point in your life. I hate to say rock bottom, maybe pebble bottom.
At that point, it was my rock bottom.
Okay, and then that's what sort of gave you a little bit of an eye-opening experience, and you decided to seek outside help. You started going to GA on a more regular basis. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was January 6th, 2009. January 16th, 2009 was my first day back in the program after going to one meeting a year and a half prior.
Wow. I can't even remember my birthday half the time, and you can actually pull that out?
Yeah, I can remember that day. I went to, the first GA meeting I went to was in my own town that I lived in, and then I decided the next time that I would drive farther. And the reason was I didn't want to run into anybody I knew. I didn't want to, on the off chance, I didn't want anybody in my hometown to know about my problem, which clearly isn't the case now as we're doing a podcast about it. But so January 16th, 2009, I went to a room in another town, Gamblers Anonymous meeting. I went to the Gamblers Anonymous website.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a lot of them are in church basements or hospital rooms, stuff like that. And this one happened to be at a hospital. I walked in, and nobody there had seen me, so they always ask you when they don't really know you in the room, are you new to the program? And I said, no, this is not my first. They ask you if this is your first meeting. I said no. And so I just sat down. But I mean, it basically was my first meeting because I didn't really remember my first meeting. And
well, before this January 2009 incident, which started off you taking GA a little more serious and you started going on a more regular basis. Prior to that, when was the last time you went to a meeting?
A year and a half earlier.
And how many meetings did you attend up to that point? Was it just like one or two?
One. It was just the one.
Oh, so
I went to one. The next week I didn't have any gas money as an excuse to go.
Okay.
It was either go to work the next morning or go to the meeting. I was on empty and I got paid the next day. And so I just was like, I can't go. And then the following week I had gas money. I pulled into the parking lot of the meeting and just sat in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Didn't go in.
We talked about
And then I decided I would try it on my own. And mind you, this whole time my parents, because they knew about my problem, my parents thought I had been going. And so at one point I was talking to them and they said, when I went to my January 16th meeting for the first time in a year and a half, afterwards I called my parents to tell them that I had gone to a meeting, and my mom said, I thought you had been going this whole time. So,
but
yeah.
But this January 16th meeting was your second meeting period.
My second meeting period.
Okay.
And the group there was just so nice, and I learned a lot that night. Other people had the exact same problems you do. And so I sat in the meeting, and I liked the group. I felt more welcomed than into the first group. And I went back. It was Monday nights, and I went Monday nights for a long time. But the reason I went back is because I felt comfortable with that group of people explaining. And I think, but part of the reason was, there are people of all ages. And when I walked into that room, I was the youngest. I was 26 at the time. I was the youngest person in that room. Which again, it was the problem with the first meeting. But there were the first meeting. There were a bunch of people in their 40s and plus.
Yeah.
Well, there were only 4 people in the first meeting, and everybody was over 40. And then me at the time, I was 24. So when I went back to this meeting, I was 26. And I think there was one other guy who might have been around my age. Now that I think about it. But other than that, it's a room full of people who are probably 35, 40 plus. And they'd been, there's all sorts of ranges of people who had been in the program.
Certainly, it does sort of make sense that older people would be addicted to gambling more so than younger people, because younger people don't necessarily have the disposable income
plus I just think younger people just think of it as fun. You're just like out having fun, and it's not till, a lot of these people had wives and kids, and so it's not until you realize that your gambling is affecting other people that you kind of think you have a problem. For me, it was clearly a problem. I was working 2 jobs. I had no money. It was a problem for myself, and that's what I came to realize at a pretty early age. Again, I said it in other podcasts, but at 18 I realized I had a problem, but I didn't do anything about it. 24, I did one thing about it, didn't stick. 26, it stuck, and I went to meetings for, I want to say 2 solid years every week, and sometimes twice a week. They recommend that you go, they say that in your first 90 days you should go to 90 meetings. You should try and make a meeting a day. Is really the key.
How feasible is that? Because we grew up in southeastern Michigan, and there are plenty of big cities in the area, Ann Arbor, Detroit, blah, blah, blah. Is that practical? Can you literally go to 90 meetings in 90 days? Or does that require...
there's meetings every day.
Oh, really?
Some days there's 2 meetings. Yeah.
And
again, I guess it depends on the area you're in, but the area I was in, it was feasible.
Oh, okay.
I didn't do that. I felt good going to 1, and then I started going to 2 for a while, 2, 1, 1, 2. And I remember 3 months into the program, I went to, they have anniversaries in the program and, your year anniversary, which is a big special occasion. They have cake and people will talk about you, and they have sort of a special meeting for people who get a year, 5 years, 10 years, so on. And about 3 months in, I went to somebody else's 1 year, and it was beautiful. I mean, I watched somebody's kids get up there and talk about how it affected them. I watched friends get up and talk about how it affected this gentleman, and it just really like, holy crap, this is what happens to people. And
wow, you're making...
For myself, it had only really affected me. I mean, yeah, you and I went and I took your ATM card and I wasted your $300. But it wasn't, I didn't affect your college education.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough.
We weren't a married couple who got divorced over it. And for other people, that's what happens. And so, I was lucky that I discovered this problem at an early age. As everyone in the program told me, like, I wish I was your age. And I remember months after I joined the program, maybe a year after I joined the program or so, I'd had my year anniversary and my parents came to my year pinning, and it was really nice. They met all these people who had changed my life for the better.
Well, how often, real quick, a lot of these people are saying they wish they would have realized they had a problem at your age.
Yeah.
Are these people that had problems at your age, or was it a problem that developed later?
Yeah.
Okay,
I think so.
Okay.
I think by what they were saying, that's what they were saying, is that I've been gambling for 20, 30 years. I wish I had realized it when I was your age.
Okay.
Because then they get those years back.
Because to hear you talk about it, like, with the majority of people are, let's say, in their mid-30s and older, which we're at now, but if the majority of these people are, let's say, middle-aged or older, it makes me wonder, and I'm just curious because, like, I've never been to these meetings. Is it because people don't develop this problem until that point in their lives? Or is it just a little more common for people to finally start seeking help for this problem at that point in their lives?
Well, I think kind of like I said earlier, it's not a problem until it's a problem.
Okay, so they may have been problem gamblers for...
It wasn't a problem for me until I couldn't pay my bills, until I couldn't pay my rent. And then it started being, until I had to go to my parents and say, once you confess that you have a problem to your life, like, for instance, to my parents, I just sit there in a room and say, oh my God, this is what I have to do, because I had to borrow rent money that month. And, it's not a problem until it's a problem. So for these people, I don't think it was a problem until it was a problem with, their family, or some had committed crimes. It's not a problem until it's a glaring problem right in your face. If you're at the casino, let's say I went to the casino 100 times before I went to a meeting, right?
Okay.
If I had won the bulk of those times, if I was ahead in money, I probably would have never gone to the program. Nobody walks into the program a winner. You know what I mean? Nobody wins $1 million and go, boy, I have a gambling problem. I'm going to go sort it out. And maybe one or two, nobody I know has ended up in a meeting.
Sure.
And some people go to meetings because it's court ordered. Some people go to meetings because, their wife or husband said, you go or we're done. I went to a meeting because I was at the point where I had to hit up family for money.
Okay, so...
There was guilt involved of why I went.
Well, that satisfies my question.
What's my life going to become if I don't go?
Sure. Okay.
And I felt good. As they say, money comes back. As long as you're working, money comes back. You're not wasting thousands of dollars a month or whatever money you're wasting. Money comes back. And to get back to the 90 meetings in 90 days, the idea is that, well, you probably gambled that many times in 90 days, right around there. So if you gamble 3 times a week, you have the time to go to a meeting 3 times a week. Because when you're gambling, you're probably there more than an hour, and usually meetings are around an hour. So if you have the time to gamble, you have the time to go to a meeting. If you want to get help, it's all about your own choice. The program is enforced, except for the few that have to go due to laws they've broken or anything. But it's a choice that you have to make for yourself. And if, you can either choose to get better, or you can choose to keep going the way you were going, and at that time I chose to get better.
I did just read an article recently about a woman, and I'm not going to go into any detail because I don't remember any of the details, but this woman was living in New York City, and I want to say that her problem started in the 80s based off of what was said in the article, and she worked for some sort of quote-unquote New York firm. And she started going down to Atlantic City, and within however long, whatever amount of time, she was skipping work 4 days a week to go down to Atlantic City to gamble. She had started gambling away all of her savings, all of her family's money. She took out another mortgage on the house, gambled that away, and she was eventually caught and sentenced to 2 years in jail because she was gambling away her quote-unquote firm's clients' money.
She embezzled.
Yeah, embezzlement, fraud, and whatever that's technically considered. And it didn't go into any detail. I do remember that. I don't know what kind of firm she worked for or what kind of clients' money she was able to take, but yeah.
I knew people like that. Yeah, I knew people like that.
And what actually stuck out about the story to me was that she was never diagnosed as a pathological or, in more modern terminology, a compulsive gambler, because when she started her problem, it wasn't a widely accepted disease yet, and it was one of those things that people were like, you're just a gambler. That's not a disease. You can stop that whenever you want. But
and I think
she
that
couldn't.
exists today.
Exactly. No, it really does.
Today.
It really does.
I still don't think gambling is accepted as widely as drug and alcohol addiction.
But what people don't realize is that drinking alcohol and doing drugs cause your body to release certain chemicals, whatever they may be, which creates the addiction. And there are certain activities, gambling, video games, only two I can think of off the top of my head right now, that reproduce the same chemicals in your body. You know, it's...
You know, recently there was a gentleman there's an article on CNN a couple weeks ago, I think, about a gentleman who had, I think it was in Japan, he had been on a gaming binge at a gaming cafe for 3 days and he died.
Oh, yeah. I can understand that.
And so I think it is the same thing, but again, I mean, that one day might be a video game addiction. I'm sure it exists. Addictions to things exist, but that's, I'm sure, even farther down the list than gambling in people's minds of what is actually an addiction. People say, oh, well, go outside and play, go throw a ball or something outside, go for a run, and people will play video games. And I think the video game addiction, the satisfaction you get is probably the same satisfaction you get from gambling, is the same satisfaction you get from drinking and drugs. I
do agree that I don't think video game addictions have become quite as significant as maybe gambling has because
other than affecting your social
exactly.
I mean, like, where's Steve? Oh, he's still playing video games inside. It doesn't cost you your fortune. It doesn't cost you your body's health. But
that's not to say exactly. That's not to say it's not legit, because I have actually read articles about how video game companies do put in noises and lights and pretty colors and things specifically to induce certain chemicals in your brain and
whatnot. For instance, like Grand Theft Auto. You played Grand Theft Auto, right?
I have.
And you play it to play it and enjoy yourself. In Grand Theft Auto, you can beat the game without solving all the missions, right? You can get to the end and beat it without solving all the missions. But wouldn't it be people who are, and I don't know, but wouldn't it be people who are addicted that, I gotta solve every single mission in order to get this whole thing complete in my brain?
That's probably part of it, but this is probably the only thing I can really attest to with video games is if I want to fall asleep at night, I will pick up a boring book and start to read it, and that will knock me right out. However, if I, for some reason, want to stay awake all night long, I will pick up one of my favorite video games and start playing it. That will actually keep me awake. That will create, I don't know, sort of an internal excitement. Like, I would get emotionally wrapped up in the story or the characters or like, it's like watching a really good movie. You empathize, you relate to what you see on screen. Only with video games it's a little bit more because you actually get to participate and help create whatever storyline or you get to help make decisions and further things along. And so I can't attest to that aspect. But and like what you were saying earlier, that guy that died in Japan, I don't remember any of the specifics, but when World of Warcraft first came out, wasn't there another similar incident of some kid, teenager found dead in his room because he'd been playing World of Warcraft for God knows how many hours, 36, 40, hell, I don't even know.
Yeah, people are probably up all night.
Really long time straight.
Surge and eating Doritos.
Nothing but
6 days.
Exactly. And,
Surge probably doesn't exist anymore, but Monster now. People are probably up drinking Red Bulls and not wanting to miss out on the game. And it's probably that same brain function.
I can definitely attest to that aspect of it. You really want to return to your character or your mission or whatever you were doing.
And I know, I've a couple friends, one who, again, he's my age, both are right around my age, and they both years and years earlier one had a problem with drugs and one had a problem with alcohol and realized it at an early age again. And so, I bonded with them over that discussion of, oh man, I was addicted to this and they were addicted to that. And it's addiction. It sucks. But
were they open and welcoming of that? Like, did they take your addiction as seriously as their addictions?
Well, one friend was open about it, and that's how I found out that he had the problem. And then we were at a cookout or a bonfire or something, and he was talking about his addiction to drugs openly because apparently everybody in the group knew it. And I looked at him and I said, "Wow, you and I have more in common than I thought." And then later on, I told him, and that's he's been awesome. He's a good friend of mine. He's been great ever since because he asked me about the addiction. He can relate to it, and then the other friend actually I ran into mutual friends, and they said, "Where have you been?" And I said, "I've been gambling for years," and that's where I dropped out. And I used to do stand-up comedy, and then I quit, and I just started gambling. And
for all of you listeners out there who haven't exactly thought Brian was that funny,
yeah, there was a time when I put a lot of effort into stand-up, and I would say that I was decent at it. I wouldn't say I was great, but I would say that I had promise. And
Brian was pretty good. I can
with something like that, though, you need to work at it. You need to work at it to become great at it. And I instead gave that up to gamble.
Not everybody's going to be a Daniel
along with
Tosh.
school. And so my friend, our mutual stand-up friends saw me, and I told them what had happened and where I was and why I hadn't been doing stand-up. And then they talked to this other friend who had the problem with drinking, and he contacted me on Facebook and was like, "I heard about your gambling. I did the same thing, only with alcohol," which has got to be 10 times harder for him, a million times harder for him at, you go out to do stand-up, there's alcohol there everywhere you go to do stand-up generally. So, there's not a slot machine or a craps table at every stand-up gig. So I was okay with that. I just spent more time trying to gamble than I did trying to put into a craft that I loved. And, gambling caused me to lose my love of what I really enjoyed doing of comedy, and it also caused me to not graduate from college. Now, there were other factors, I'm sure. I can't use that as an excuse, but, that's what happened to me.
Well,
I became more obsessed with gambling. I was more content working 2 jobs to get money to gamble than I was trying to do what I loved in life.
Can we get back to your January 16th, 2009 GA meeting stint? And what I mean is, you talked about how that was, if not here with me, you talked about how that was your first meeting back, and you stuck with the program for, 2 years?
Yeah.
Pretty religiously? Talk about...
Yeah, I was there every week.
What about that 2 years?
I felt good. Money came back. I paid my bills. I think I'd gone back to school. I got back a job that I was let go from. I was let go because I was spending, now part of it, I was out late nights doing comedy, but I was also out late nights gambling, and eventually they said, you're showing up late to work every morning, and that was part of it. And so I was let go, and so then, I got that job back. I was working 2 jobs. I was in Gamblers Anonymous. My life was much better than it had been, and I realized that, and so I stuck with it. And I think we'll end up ending this podcast at the end of this, but we'll talk more. But is that eventually I got to a point. Again, it's not a huge ask to go to a meeting a week, to take 2 hours out of your evening to go out to a meeting. But eventually, I was working 2 jobs. I was tired, and I stayed home on Monday night instead of going to the meeting. And I was like, I'll skip this one.
So you kept working 2 jobs even while you were...
I had plenty to repay.
Okay. So it was financial reasons kept you working 2 jobs for your 2 years. Do you want to talk about the end of that 2 years? What happened when you started to... I hate to say relapse because I don't know if you relapsed yet, but when you stopped going, and what really brought that about?
Well, I think there was about 3 or 4 weeks where I didn't go. You talk yourself out of 1 week. The next week, something stupid like I'm tired and I don't feel like going. I didn't go.
Okay.
And people from the program are great. People, call you. Hey, where are you at?
Oh, really? Well, that's nice.
Oh, yeah. It's a wonderful program. Problem is, I think this is where I have to swallow, I don't know, pride or not think the way I think, which is I started getting to the point where I didn't want this to define my life. I didn't want Gamblers Anonymous to be my end all be all. And it's not a knock on anybody in the program, but sometimes the program was all people had, and they would hang out. I just didn't want the program to be what I was about. I didn't want Gamblers Anonymous to be why I existed. But at the same time, Gamblers Anonymous, I don't want to say saved my life. I was not at a point at which I wanted to take my life or anything like that.
Sure.
Now, there were times leaving the casino where I thought, and I said this on another podcast to a friend, our Who Died podcast, we were talking about suicide, and I said I've never really strongly considered it, but there were times you leave in the casino in a dark spot, and
the brief flash of the thought does cross your mind, but
well, in my head I was leaving, and I think it was that time you were with me when we were leaving. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go get a job, and you just start thinking, I have to go get a third job or a second job or whatever it was at the time, and you're like, boy, it'd be a lot easier. I could just take this car, put it into the median of the expressway, and solve a lot of problems. But that's not. I'm much happier alive than I am. No matter how bad it gets, I would much rather be alive. I would much rather be alive than. So that's not. I mean, I've never actually considered that. And people do though. People have. I mean, there are people. There's articles. You can find them. There's articles of one gentleman at one of the Detroit casinos jumped off the 4th level of the parking structure. He walked out of the casino and jumped off and killed himself walking out of the casino, because it's such a low point. But I never wanted to do that, so that's why I went to the program, to get better. We get better. But I got complacent and content and decided that I'm in a good place. I don't need to go every week. And then once you stop going every week, then you start to think, oh, I don't really need to go anymore. And I just sort of stopped going. And there had been a time period, and it's weird. I remember the first day I went, but I don't remember. I got to around 2 years, and I stopped going, and then I just decided, I don't know what happened. One day I had money, I was fine, and I went back to the casino. And going back to the casino that one time then caused me to not, and this is tough, this is where I give people credit who go back to meetings. People who go out and relapse and come back. Those are the important people, because you can relapse. It can happen, but you have to go back to a meeting. You have to go back. And I was too embarrassed, and I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to go back to these people who, in my head, I'm the youngest one in that meeting at the time, and I just felt like, wow, I had gotten all these nice compliments, and I felt good. I didn't want to let this group of people down, and I did. Although they'll tell you, no, you didn't. You let us down because you didn't come back. And now I see that, but at the time I didn't go back. I went to the casino, relapsed, and then I didn't go back. And I didn't go to the casino for a while again, but then I wasn't going to meetings, and I thought, then I just went back on a binge again, and everything fell apart again.
So after it fell apart, how long did it take you to get back in the meetings?
A year.
Okay. And I can't help but think, this is probably biased of me, or because I don't have any real life experience, but I can't help but think of.
This is why we do this, because you don't.
I know. Exactly.
Understand, and this is why you're here, and this is why I'm here. We have two different thought processes.
And it's not even experience, but when you're talking about relapsing, and you were in your mid-20s, and you didn't feel comfortable going back after you had relapsed, my first thought was of Tommy Gavin's, what was it, his cousin in the TV show Rescue Me, because he was an alcoholic, and he had that ex-priest cousin, I think, who was easily in his late 40s, mid to late 40s, maybe even early 50s, who had been a recovering alcoholic for a long, long time. I want to say at least 15 years. Now that you're a little bit older, because what we're talking about now with you relapsing, that was, what, 6-7 years ago? Well, you said 2009. So it was.
I was 28 or something at the time when I relapsed.
It was exactly 6 years ago, almost 6 years and like 2 weeks. I hate to say that 6 years. Well, I mean,
no, it was 6 years 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Do you feel that it's easier for older, more experienced, and I hate to say more mature people to admit to their mistakes, especially in a situation like this? Like this is not a normal situation. You have people that have these kinds of addictions, whether it's gambling or drugs or alcohol. Is it easier now that you're older to admit your mistakes, return to your meetings, and move on? You know, accepting of the fact that, yes, I made this mistake, but I'm going to own up to it. And, you know, I love you guys. I need to come back to this meeting because you're my life raft. You guys are my beacon of light in this dark tunnel. Is it easier now that you're a little bit older to admit to those mistakes and get back into your meetings when you need to? Because you did mention earlier, no. Okay.
I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's easy for anybody. I don't care what your circumstance. Because everybody, here's the thing. In the program, in Gamblers Anonymous, it doesn't matter because you hear different stories. And some people throw out numbers of what they've lost. And you'll go into some meetings and you'll hear what people lost and you'll go, wow, I don't have a problem. They lost that much? But it's circumstantial. It's, you know, on your own situation. If you think you have a problem, you have a problem. It doesn't matter what other people's problems are. So I don't think it's easy for anybody to admit to the problem. I don't think it's easy, no matter how old you are.
Okay, I'm not asking if it's easy, but you are saying that as you get older, it doesn't get easier.
No, I don't think it gets easier.
Well, then let me ask you this.
I think it's clearer because I think you know it because you have proof. Like me, I had 2 years of clean time because I was, because I went to the meetings. I owe it to the meetings that I had clean time.
That kind of speaks to my next question. Now that you're older, do you realize and accept the fact that these meetings are more important? I.e., a 20-year-old going to a meeting, well, I mean, you can't be a 20-year-old that's been in a meeting for 10 years. But now that you're a little bit older, is it easier for you to understand why people go to weekly meetings for 20 years in a row into their 50s or 60s or whatever? Because you need that. That really helps keep.
Oh, yeah, I totally understand that.
But is it easier for you to understand? Like, now that you're a little bit older,
I understand. Yes.
Do you go to meetings?
I understand, but ask me the last time I went to a meeting.
Okay.
The last time I went to a meeting was 10 months ago.
Okay.
And part of it is because, again, as we said earlier, I gambled 7 months ago. And part of it, again, is like, I don't want to crawl back into that room. And part of it, too, and we'll talk about this another day because I'd like to formulate what I'm going to say better than what I could express right now.
Sure.
But there are certain aspects of the program that I not really take issue with that make me uncomfortable. And so, I mean, this is part of the reason you and I started this podcast, and which is why I thank you for doing this with me, is because each week it gives me an outlet to talk to somebody about gambling without actually having to go to a meeting. And I can't say that this is good or bad, but right now this is working for me. And
sure.
Yes, I need to go back to meetings, to answer your question. I need to go back to meetings. I understand the importance of them. I haven't. And I know it's easy. I mean, if anyone's listening right now, they're like, well, then go.
I know. No, they're correct.
And they're correct.
I mean,
they're correct.
You spend enough, I mean, you take the time to sit and talk with me for an hour.
I'm going to be honest with you. You're giving me an hour to talk about my feelings and for us to go back and forth. And it's a different perspective of somebody who hasn't gone to meetings, you and me who has. And I'm going to say this is quite helpful. And I don't want to use this as an excuse for not going to a meeting, but I guess that's kind of what I'm doing. But I don't want that to be the reason to stop doing this podcast. I think it's great that I can sit here and talk to you about this every week and maybe help people, maybe not, but it helps me. And for that, I'll take it. That's why we started this, because part of the reason we started this too is because gambling is becoming more prevalent in the news because a lot of people are talking about legalizing sports gambling.
Sure, yeah.
And we should talk about this a different day, but the commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver, wants to legalize sports betting. John McCain just came out and said we should legalize sports betting, and I take issue with that because if you make it easier for people to gamble, I think more people are going to wind up with a problem.
And you know, I don't really understand this.
That's a conversation for a different day, but
sure.
What were you going to say?
Well, I don't really understand the legalizing of sports gambling because when I think of gambling, you know, being a non-gambler, I've never I've been to casinos and I've been to various places and I have gambled, but are you saying that sports gambling, like if I wanted to bet on a football game, that's not legal right now? Or what do you mean? Like, I feel like gambling is already a legal institution.
Well, I mean, people, like, we just had the Super Bowl this past weekend.
Sure.
People in their own homes, play squares.
No, but like you can go to Vegas. There are Vegas odds on the Super Bowl.
And that's the point. You can go to Vegas and gamble. That's why Vegas is there. You can take a vacation and go gamble.
But I can't bet on...
You can go to the sports book in Vegas and gamble. You can bet through Vegas.
Oh.
That's legal. But you have to go there and do it.
Okay, but I can't, in North Carolina, I can't just be like, I want to bet $500 on the Seahawks because they're not going to throw on their final play of the game.
I'm not too sure on what rules are and where. Some states you can gamble legally.
Okay, but generally...
Sports betting right now, though, is a Vegas thing, and it's a bookie thing. It's illegal gambling.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, well,
when I was 19, working at a place, someone was bringing in football things each week, and I paid $20 to bet on games. And I wasn't a big sports gambler, but at the time I did it. But again, that's through somebody. That's through technically illegal. You're doing it amongst friends, coworkers. But people talk. For instance, we're coming up to March soon, and there'll be a lot of talk about the NCAA tournament, and that is a huge, people fill out their brackets and gamble.
Sure. Oh, but what you're saying is March Madness brackets and all that, that's technically illegal? But like office pools and things like that, it's just you do it amongst yourselves?
I don't know the specifics, but you can't.
Fair enough.
You can't, there's not a place in the state of Michigan where you can go and legally bet on sports.
Okay, you're right.
And I think that's true in a lot of places. And I'm no expert. I didn't gamble sports, but this is why people are talking about legalizing sports gambling across the board.
Oh.
And part of the reason is because those institutions want that money.
Mm-hmm.
Right now they're not getting that money because it's illegal betting that's happening. They don't get a cut of it if it's illegal.
Oh, but that's why they want to legalize it, is because...
You legalize it, then there's taxes.
And a portion of that, whether the actual money or the taxes will go to... Oh.
People get theirs.
Well...
They want to get theirs. And I just think that if people, what's going to happen is, and this is what came up in GA a lot, which was that some people who came in, a lot of young people who came in, a lot of it was online poker.
Sure.
Because you can go online. Here, if you have to drive 45 minutes down to the casino, which I didn't have a big problem with, but at the same time, it's a lot easier to talk yourself out of getting in the car, driving, parking, going in. It's a lot easier to talk yourself out of doing that than it is to log onto a website and place a bet with your credit card.
Yeah.
The money doesn't exist when you're doing that. It doesn't. And it's, the money's gone at that point. Or maybe you win, I don't know. But if you legalize it across the board, I think you're going to run into a lot more people with problems. And not to say that I'm not anti-gambling. I think people can do it without a problem. I, for instance, have a problem, and I think a lot more people have problems than the world realizes. But that's, again, true of anything. So it's a fine line. I just don't like that the conversation right now is to legalize sports gambling because a lot of people who don't gamble you're making it a lot easier for them to do it.
Well, for what it's worth, I don't think the NFL should have legalized gambling because they already don't pay taxes. The last thing they need is another cut of regular people's money just because they want to throw a couple of bucks on the Seahawks or Tom Brady or whatever.
Yeah, and I listen to some sports podcasts. And, I listen to sports radio, and a lot of times they talk about the lines and stuff, and I turn it off because I can't sit there and listen to people talking about gambling for 20 minutes, which bugs me because I like sports.
I didn't realize people talked about the lines.
Oh, yeah. You listen to different podcasts on ESPN.com, and people talk about sports gambling. It's, it's not who's going to win, it's what the line is, and it's all about lines, and it bugs me because it creates that in you of, ooh. If I could log on to a lot of them. Right now, I think online gambling is illegal. But a lot of those websites are offshore.
Yeah, exactly. That's how they get around those laws.
And that's how you get around it. And that's pretty easy. And luckily, I've never been too intrigued with trying to hunt that down because I don't want to open that floodgate.
So thankfully, up to this point, you've mainly been a casino gambler and not an internet or sports gambler.
Yes. But I have a big problem. Here's another one. You'll notice probably in a lot of towns that people listening, maybe if they're listening, C, you can probably find a poker room. And how they get around the law is that it's a charity thing where half the pot goes to charity, the other pot goes to the guy winning.
Yeah.
So, and again, we'll talk about this another podcast because we're getting towards an hour, but poker rooms in towns, I've met a lot of people who went to those and ruined themselves, and they operate under the guise of a charity when it's really bullshit gambling. So don't give me this law about, I mean, Ann Arbor, where we're from, had poker rooms.
Really?
You know? Hell, there's a bar called the Shark Club in Howell that had poker tables every Friday, Saturday night, people playing poker, and it's all these guys sitting in there playing. And again, maybe they can do it, maybe they can't, but
I've been there.
To make it that easy to go get, and it's here's what I've said this a lot, but it's their money. They do with what they want. That's fine. But I think there's more people out there with problems than we realize, and I don't think that having all these places, all these outlets to waste your money into gambling is helping anybody.
Of course.
Whereas Vegas
Absolutely
existed,
right.
It was a vacation. It was a special occasion. You go for a weekend, I blew $2,000. It was a vacation. Oh well. You know, but now Vegas and Atlantic City has spread throughout the country.
Sure.
And believe me, we'll do podcasts on how many casinos actually exist in this world and exist across the United States. I mean, I moved out to California. My drive alone, I probably passed 20 casinos.
Sure.
And I can hint right now that I stopped.
You would.
I did. I couldn't. I drove by so many, and eventually I did. I caved one night. I caved.
We'll talk about that
later. And that was
later.
a year ago. And that's the podcast another day, but this is my problem and not other people's, but other people have the problem, and I just enjoy that we're talking about it.
Sure. Well, and it makes sense because if all of a sudden, and this is ridiculous, this is sort of I can't remember the terminology. This is taking an example to the extreme, but if all of a sudden tomorrow the United States government was to legalize heroin, that heroin was maybe not the best option, but the point is, there would all of a sudden be this huge influx of people addicted to a drug because all of a sudden it was legally available, and people that would normally follow the laws and regulations of the world they live in, they would get to experience something that they never normally would have, and they would realize, oh, hey, I really like this. Gambling's the same way. If you legalize gambling all across the board, there is going to be a huge upsurge in people that are addicted gamblers. There's no question.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything. You make it more available, more people are going to get it. Like right now, if you want heroin and you're an addict, you'll probably
heroin's not the best option because heroin is an addictive substance. But
yeah, but you can find it, and that's people are going to get what they want to get them high. But if you make it more available, you're hurting those people. I mean, people are going to do what they want to do and get what they want to get, but if the government is behind it, and then that's what I'm torn because I don't want to be preachy about it because it's a problem, but it also, I mean, it's a social problem too in the respect that a lot of people who gamble, it ends up costing the government money because people file bankruptcy, people don't pay their bills. This happens because of gambling. People.
You're right.
So that's all I'm saying. And
ladies and gentlemen, that's all Brian's saying.
That wasn't a very good way to end it, I know, but I think I was just sort of spiraling and repeating myself.
No, and that's absolutely fine. But I'm Chris. I don't gamble.
I'm Brian, and I'm trying not to. I haven't gambled in 7 months, and thank you for listening.
And he's doing really well, by the way. So.
Well, I was doing really well before, too. But I appreciate you doing this with me, Chris, and we'll be back next week, and we'll continue my story, and we'll try and bring in some more social aspects of it.
If any of you out there are addicted gamblers, you can always check out gamblersanonymous.org, because like we've said before, we are not professionals, but we want to get those of you out there.
It's a personal problem that affected the both of us.
Exactly. So, with that being said...
Chris by choice, but out of friendship it affected him.
Yeah. With that being said, peace out.